just show up and bring the news that she's getting older. Hey guys, David from PassTheGuitar.live here for another tutorial, and in this video we're gonna be working on Visiting Hours by Ed Sheeran. Such a beautiful song. I highly recommend you listen and read those lyrics. It is really a beautiful song, so kudos to you, Ed Sheeran, for writing such an incredible song. There's definitely a lot more songs that you have written that are incredible as well, but this one really touched the heart. In this tutorial, I'm going to be covering what he is doing on the live version. You can find on YouTube. And he plays in G major, so I'm not using any capos. But if you're going to try to play with the studio version, you're going to have to use a capo on the first fret. And then you're going to be all set. I'm also going to share a simplified version, like ways for you to substitute the chords that you don't know how to play with some basic open string chords. So don't worry, I have you covered. And this is all you need to know before we start this lesson. So if you are ready, you know the drill. Let's waste no more time and dive right in. For this song, we're gonna do things a little bit different here. Instead of covering all the chords that we need and then the strumming pattern and then go into the song form, I'm gonna go by parts because there are quite a few new chords to be added, some unusual chords in the chorus. So I'm gonna actually cover first the verse, which we're gonna see most of the chords that we're gonna need for this song, and then the chorus. And with that, you're pretty much gonna know everything for this song. So for the verse, the chords that we need are G major. And he plays, and he's not using the index, he's actually muting the 5th string with the 2nd finger. So it's just slightly touching there and not ringing. But you can play G major if that's too hard for you. And if this version of G major with 4 fingers is too hard for you, you can also use G major with 3 fingers. The next chord up is E minor 7. So if you're playing this version of G major, it will be an easy transition because these 2 fingers are going to stay in place. So E minor 7 there. And if E minor 7 is too hard for you, you can also use E minor. So for E minor 7, the only difference is that aside from fingers 1 and 2 on the 5th string and 4th string, 2nd fret, you're gonna keep those 2 fingers on the 3rd fret, on the 2nd string and on the 1st string. The next chord up is C at 9. And just like G major, he also plays C at 9 without using the index. So he's muting the 4th string with the 2nd finger here. But you can play C at 9, including that index that on the 4th string 2nd fret. And if C at 9 is too hard for you, you can also use C major. And the last chord we need for the verses is the D sus4, which is basically the same thing as D, but instead of having the 3rd finger, we have the pinky down here on the 1st string 3rd fret. And again, if this chord is too hard for you, you can use D major and you'll be okay. And that's all the chords we need for the verse. So if you are ready, let's move on to the next step, which is to take a look at the strumming pattern. And here it is. This is the strumming pattern he uses for the majority of the song, but keep in mind that he does play some variations of this strumming pattern, which is a common thing when you're playing acoustic guitar or when you're strumming songs. Well, let's listen to the way that I play and the way that I count. I'm gonna first do the muted strings, so focus on the way that I'm counting. All right, here we go. 1, 2, E and 4 E and 1, 2 and E and 4 E and 1, 2 and E and 4 E and down, 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 up, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, 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 up, down, down, up, down, up. Very nice strumming. Now let's just plug in a chord. Let's use G major. Whatever version of G major you want to use, it's gonna be okay. Here we go. 1, 2, E and 4 E and 1, 2 and E and 4 E and 1, 2 and E and 4 E and down, down, down. And now that we have the chords and the strumming pattern for the verse, let's take a look at the chord progression. And here you have it, it's a 4-bar phrase that gets repeated. But I want you guys to pay attention to the last measure before we go over anything else, because on that last measure, we're gonna change the strumming slightly. We do have a lot of chords on that last measure. We have C at 9, and then G for the second beat, and then D sus4 for the third beat and fourth, the last 2 beats. And the strumming pattern that we have here is slightly different than what we have. So let's go over the strumming pattern quickly. Let's just zoom in here on this last measure and let's just practice this part. I'm gonna play it first with muted strings so you guys get a sense of the rhythm. Here we go. 1, 2, and 3, a 4, E, and 1, and 2, and 3, a 4, E, and 1, and 2, and 3, a 4, E, and down, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Nice, right? This is a bit different than everything else, so it's very important that we practice it isolated. Now we have C at 9 here for the first beat, and then G major for the second beat, and then D sus4 for the third and fourth. So it's gonna be C at 9, down, up, and then G, down, down, up, and then D sus4 is gonna be down, up, down, up, down, up. So C at 9, 1, and then G, 2, and then C at 9, D sus4, 3, up, 4, E, and all right, let's do that in time. 1, 2, 3, up, 4, E, and 1, and 2, and 3, and up, 4, E. One more time. 1, and 2, and 3, and up, 4, E, and Cool. Now that we covered that last measure, let's take a look again at the whole thing. Here we have the 4-bar phrase. So we start with a full measure of G major, and then we head into a full measure of E minor 7, and then we head into a full measure of C at 9, and then we have that last measure where we play C at 9 for 1 beat, G for the second beat, and then D sus4 for the last 2 beats. So let's go straight into plugging in the strumming pattern and practicing the verse the way it's written. So we're gonna play this chord progression 2 times. Here we go. 1, 2, up, and 4, E, and 1, and 2, and up, and 4, E, E minor 7, and 2, and up, and 4, E, and 1, and 2, and up, and here we go to change. 1, and 2, and 3, and up, 4, repeating G, and 2, and up, and 4, E, and 1, and 2, and up, and 4, E, and C, and 2, down, up, down, down, up, down, C, down, up, down, down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Now let's go over all we need to play the chorus. Let's take a look at the chorus first. Here it is. It's an 8-bar phrase. The first line, we're playing some of the chords that you already know. The G, the C at 9, and the D sus4, you already know. I want you to focus on the second line, and specifically on the first 2 measures of the second line, where you see all of these chords with names that maybe you haven't heard before. Well, these chords are power chords. We're just gonna be playing 2 strings at a time, but I'm also gonna share with you guys a alternate version, a version where you can use open string chords as well. Let's take a look at the chords that we're gonna do the way that he plays, which is the power chord. So the first chord that you see there on the first measure of that second line is the E5. And we're gonna play that E5 all the way down here on the 7th fret, on the 5th string, and on the 4th string here, 9th fret. And I'm using index and pinky, and I highly recommend you do that because we're gonna be stretching this index all the way down. So you're already gonna have your pinky in position, and that's also the way that he is playing. And make sure that for this chord, we're not hitting any other strings, meaning everything else should be muted. So the only two strings that we should be hearing are strings number 5 and 4. Everything else should be muted, all right? And you can do that by just lightly touching your index on the other strings underneath, and then they're gonna get muted sounds. And then you can also touch your index here on the 6th string, or even lightly touch here with your 2nd finger. There's many ways that you can mute strings, but we need to get all these strings muted aside from 5 and 4. All right, E5, we're good, we're nice. The following chord is this D sharp augmented. So I know it's a crazy name, but all you're gonna do here is move your index down to the 6th fret. So pinky stays on the same note, on the same string, on the same fret, and an index just slides down on the same string but goes to the 6th fret. That's it. That's all we need to do for D sharp augmented. And in the following chord there is the D6. And keep in mind those chords have no thirds, right? D6, all we're gonna do is slide down here the index to the 5th fret. And then the same thing, we should be muting all the other strings. And as you can tell, now we're pretty wide open here, and I know this is quite a stretch. The other chord that we see here is the C sharp 7, and it also doesn't have a third. And what we're gonna do to play is just slide the index down to the 4th fret, and now we really have this really stretched. So one more time, E5, D sharp augmented, and then we have D6 and C sharp 7. If this stretch is too hard for you and you want to start with something, you can start by just playing the note on the 5th string. Just start on the 7th fret and then go down to the 6th fret and then go down to the 5th fret and then go down to the 4th fret. But again, I told you that I was going to share chords that you can play in order to keep them like simple and open string basic chords. So instead of E5, you can use, now you see here, E minor instead of E5. And instead of that D sharp augmented, now you see B7. Yeah, these substitutions are more like the sound. Don't focus so much on, in theory, if they would work or not, but the sound work and the function of the chords work as well. So the following chord after that, instead of D6, we now see G major. And then the last chord, instead of C sharp 7, now we have A7. So one more time, E minor to B7 to G major to A7. And there you go, 2 options. You can actually do the same thing Ed Sheeran does on the live version, just playing those power chords. Or if the power chords are too hard for you and you don't want to do just one single note going down, you can play the open basic chords, E minor and the B7, G major and A7. And that's also going to work and it's going to sound great. Well, let's go back here to the chorus and take a look at the things that are different with the strumming, because we do have the strumming pattern is the same one throughout the entire chorus as well, but we're going to change the strumming pattern for those 2 specific measures where we have that cadence. And for that, it's actually even simpler. We're just playing 8th notes and just down strums. So I'm going to just show to you with the power chords here. It's 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Let's practice that. If you want to use the power chords, that's great. If you want to use the single notes, that's also great. If you want to use the open string chords, that also works. I'm going to be using the power chords, the original version. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 repeat. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and... Nice! Now that we covered that, we can go back and take a look at the entire chorus and see what else we have there. Take a look at it. A paraphrase, like I said, we have two lines here. On the first line, we actually have these two measures that get repeated. It starts with a full measure of C at 9, and then we go into a measure where we share G major with D sus4. And then we do the same thing again, C at 9, and then the following measure is the G major moving to D sus4. And then we have that cadence going down with the E5 and then the D sharp augmented, the D6 and the C sharp 7. And then we end the chorus with a full measure of G major, heading into the last measure is a full measure of D sus4. Keep in mind here that for the measure that we're sharing, G major and D, the D is gonna be anticipated. You're gonna play D on the first up strum that you have. So down, 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 D. Right there is the D. So 1 and a 2 E and a 3 E and. So one more time. 1 E and a 2 E and a 3 E and 4 E and a. So G, 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 D, 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 D. All right, that's it. Let's plug in all the strummings and all the rhythm that we have to do with everything. Use the chords that you feel the most comfortable with, and let's practice the chorus. Here we go. 1, 2, E and 4 E and 1 E, 2 E and E and 4 E and 1, 2 E and E and 4 E and C at 9, 2 E. Here we go. 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and D6 and 2 and 3 and 4. Back to strumming in G. 2 and up, E and 4 E and D. 2 and up, E and 4 E and up. The last thing we have to take a look at is what he plays for the breaks, or if you want to call it interludes, like I like to use the word interludes, and it's the same thing he uses for the outro. It's super simple, it's just two measures. Take a look at it. You have here two measures. It's a measure where you move from G major to C at 9, and then you have a full measure of G major. And you have the rhythm written here for the strumming pattern because the strumming pattern changes slightly for the first measure, the measure that we changed from G major to C major. When you go back to that full measure of G major, it's just that G major with the strumming pattern we learned in the beginning of the video. But let's take a look at the first measure that we have here because the strumming is slightly different. So I'm gonna strum the strumming pattern here and count and play muted strings. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, down, 2 E and 3, 4 E and 1, 2 and 3, 4 E and 1, 2 and 3, 4 E and down, 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 up, down, up, down, up, down, up. That's it. If you do not feel comfortable adding more strumming patterns, don't forget, experiment. You can definitely use the strumming pattern that we worked on in the beginning of this video for pretty much the entire song. It's gonna work and it's gonna sound great. But if you wanna add more elements and play more like he is playing on that live version, and then this is what you're gonna play for that specific measure, and then you change that to the actual strumming pattern for the second measure of G major. And this one is not that hard to change because you're playing the first half of that strumming pattern. There is no anticipations for G, and then the second half for C. So let's plug in those chords and practice the break. Let's do it 2 times so we get to practice a little bit. 1, 2, and 3, 4 E, and 1, and covered everything we need to know to play all the parts of the song, and even some simplified versions of chords so everybody can play this beautiful tune. It's time for us to put everything together and practice in a playthrough demo. And we're going to do that by playing a verse and also a chorus with the break. And you can call it the break, but it also can be part of the chorus. It always happens at the end of the choruses, after every chorus. So you can call it part of the chorus if you want. Let's start with a verse. Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
I wish that heaven 3 had visiting hours 2, so I could just show up 3 and bring the news that she's getting older 2, and I wish that you met her, the things that she'll love from me, I got them all from you.
Pretty cool, right? Now let's do the chorus and the break. Here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Can I just take a while and we'll put all the world to rights? The little ones will grow and I'll still drink your favorite wine. Soon they're going to close, but I will see you another day. So much has changed since you've been here. 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and up.
Alright guys, this is a wrap for this lesson. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you guys enjoyed and learned a lot. And don't forget that if you have any questions or requests for any type of content you would like to see me covering in this channel, just leave me a comment below and I'll get right to it. My name is David and I'll see you guys on the next video.